The Vakrian scout ship hung in orbit above Earth, its sensors sweeping across the blue planet with methodical precision. Commander Thelzar reviewed the data streams with growing satisfaction. 3 cycles of observation had confirmed what their advanced intelligence suggested. This world would fall easily. The inhabitants show remarkable fragility, Thelzar announced to his crew. Their skeletal structure contains calcium compounds that shatter under minimal force. Our preliminary scans indicate they require constant hydration and perish within mere days without water consumption. Most fascinating, they cannot regulate their own body temperature and must rely on artificial coverings to survive. His second officer, Krell, nodded enthusiastically. The psychological profile is equally promising, Commander. They form emotional attachments that cloud judgment. They experience fear responses that paralyze them in combat situations. Their primitive belief systems divide them into countless factions. They even wage war against their own kind over trivial ideological differences. Thelzar allowed himself a rare expression of amusement. The Galactic Council will be pleased. This world is rich in resources, and its inhabitants pose negligible threat. We shall begin the invasion within the solar cycle. Below, in a conference room buried 300 feet beneath the Colorado mountains, a very different conversation was taking place. General Patricia Hawkins stood before a wall of screens, displaying intercepted alien communications. The translation algorithms had been working overtime for the past 72 hours, and what they revealed made her want to laugh and cry simultaneously. "Let me get this straight," said Dr. James Chen, the lead xenolinguist. "They think we're made of glass?" "Not glass exactly," Chen replied, adjusting his thick-rimmed glasses. "Their scans detected our calcium-based bones and somehow concluded we're extremely fragile. They also seem to think we'll die of thirst in 3 days, that we can't handle temperature variations, and that we're emotionally unstable cowards who can't work together." Director Rachel Torres of the CIA leaned forward. "How did they get everything so wrong?" Chen pulled up a series of alien data files. "Best we can figure, they intercepted some of our entertainment broadcasts and survival training materials, but their translation software is garbage. They watched a first aid video about treating fractures and concluded all human bones break easily. They saw a wilderness survival show about finding water and assumed 3 days without it is our absolute limit. They intercepted footage of people in winter coats and decided we can't thermoregulate." "What about the emotional instability angle?" Hawkins asked. "Reality television," Chen said flatly. "They apparently analyzed several seasons of various reality shows and concluded that's representative of human behavior under normal conditions." The room fell silent for a moment. Then someone started laughing. Within seconds, the entire command staff was struggling to maintain composure. "This is insane," Torres said, wiping her eyes. "They're planning an invasion based on watching reality TV and misunderstanding first aid videos." Hawkins raised her hand, bringing order back to the room. "All right, people, listen up. This is the opportunity of a lifetime, but we have to be smart about it. They expect us to break easily, get scared, fall apart as a society, and die without constant water. We're going to give them exactly what they expect, right up until the moment we don't." Colonel David Jackson, head of Special Operations Command, leaned back in his chair. "You want to play weak?" "I want to play to their assumptions," Hawkins corrected. "Every single one of them. We have approximately 2 weeks before they start landing troops based on their communication patterns. That gives us time to prepare a welcome they'll never forget." Over the next 10 days, a plan took shape that was equal parts military strategy and theater production. Every branch of government and military was briefed on what intelligence was calling Operation Underestimate. The alien misconceptions about humanity were about to become the most deadly trap ever conceived. Dr. Lisa Park, a biomechanical engineer, was tasked with creating fake medical equipment that would reinforce alien beliefs. We're basically building props, she explained to her team. Oversized medical braces, casts that look extremely supportive, special stretchers that suggest we need careful handling. When they see these items in our field hospitals, it'll confirm everything they think they know about our fragility. Meanwhile, psychological operations teams were preparing communications designed to be intercepted. Captain Robert Hayes drafted messages between fictitious military units that expressed fear and confusion. Make it sound real, Hawkins had instructed. They need to believe we're on the verge of panic. The hydration angle proved particularly useful. Major Jennifer Walsh coordinated the placement of water stations throughout every city. Make them obvious, she ordered. Every street corner, every building, everywhere they look. We need them to think we're desperately dependent on constant water access. As for the temperature regulation misconception, that required coordinated civilian participation. News broadcasts began featuring weather reports that emphasized the danger of temperature changes. Stores prominently displayed clothing with slogans about protection from the elements. Parks and public spaces installed heating and cooling stations presented as essential for human survival. The most delicate operation involved simulating social division. The intelligence community created elaborate, fake social media campaigns showcasing exaggerated conflicts over trivial matters. News networks ran staged debates that appeared to show a civilization on the brink of tearing itself apart. It was crucial that these efforts looked authentic when intercepted by alien surveillance. The hardest part is keeping this secret from our own people, Torres admitted during a strategy session. We can't risk word getting out and someone accidentally revealing the truth to alien scouts. That's why we're going with the cover story, Hawkins replied. As far as the general public knows, we're preparing for a potential invasion by playing up our vulnerabilities to lure them into a false sense of security. Which is technically true, just not the whole truth. Chen had been studying the alien psychology profiles humanity had compiled. The Vakrians have a rigid command structure. They trust their sensors and intelligence absolutely. In their culture, questioning established data is considered a sign of weakness. Once they've committed to a plan based on their observations, they won't deviate. Perfect, Jackson said. So we give them data that confirms their bias. They commit to a plan that exploits our perceived weaknesses, and then we tear that plan apart. The actual military preparations happened beneath this elaborate deception. Weapons systems were positioned and hidden. Troops trained for urban combat scenarios that assumed alien forces would treat humans as extremely fragile. Every strategy was built around the idea that the enemy would underestimate human resilience, strength, and adaptability. Lieutenant Commander Ashley Wright, a tactical analyst, presented the probable invasion strategy. Based on their communications, they're planning to land in major urban centers. They expect minimal resistance because they think we'll panic and scatter. Their troops will be equipped with capture equipment, not heavy weapons, because they believe we break easily. They're not preparing for sustained combat because they don't think we're capable of it. They're planning to take prisoners, not fight a war, Hawkins observed. Exactly. They see this as more of a roundup operation than an invasion. They're allocating resources for processing facilities and transportation, not combat support. The final piece fell into place when intelligence intercepted the alien landing schedule. They would deploy simultaneously in 12 major cities across 5 continents. The invasion would begin at dawn, calculated to catch humanity when they believed we'd be most vulnerable and disorganized. On the night before the invasion, Hawkins addressed key personnel via secure channels. Remember, for the first phase, we play along. Let them land, let them deploy, let them spread out into our cities believing they're herding frightened, fragile creatures. Every soldier, every civilian who's been briefed knows their role. We show fear. We appear to break easily. We seem desperate for water. We act like we're freezing or overheating based on minor temperature changes. We let them think they've already won. She paused, her expression hardening. And then, at precisely 0900 hours, we show them what humanity actually is. Around the world, soldiers checked weapons that wouldn't fire until the designated time. Medical teams stood ready with real equipment hidden behind the props. Engineers made final adjustments to systems designed to turn cities into deadly mazes for an overconfident enemy. Civilians in designated safe zones prepared to play their parts before moving to shelter. The Vacrian fleet began its descent as Earth's sun rose over the Pacific. Thelzar watched from his command ship with satisfaction. His troops reported that initial observations confirmed all projections. Humans were indeed clustering around water sources. They wore excessive protective clothing despite mild temperatures. Their communications showed signs of panic and social breakdown. "This will be the easiest conquest in Vacrian history," Krell announced. "The Council will award us the highest honors." "Begin the landing operation," Thelzar ordered. "Remember, these creatures are fragile. Capture them carefully. They're more valuable as laborers if undamaged." Across Earth, massive alien ships settled into position above cities. Landing craft descended, their holds full of troops equipped with nets, restraining fields, and crowd control devices. Not weapons of war, but tools for managing livestock. The Vacrians emerged from their craft, expecting chaos and terror. What they found seemed to confirm every expectation. Humans scattered in apparent panic, seeking shelter in buildings. Some appeared to stumble and fall with theatrical timing. Others huddled near water fountains, seeming desperate. The aliens moved through streets with growing confidence, activating their capture fields and herding small groups toward collection points. In Colorado, Hawkins watched a dozen screens showing similar scenes playing out worldwide. "All units hold position," she transmitted. "Let them commit. Let them spread out. Let them think they understand us." Private First Class Tommy Richardson crouched behind an overturned car in downtown Los Angeles, watching alien soldiers pass within 20 feet. He wore a medical brace on his arm that looked serious, but was actually just foam and plastic. When an alien looked his way, he made a show of fear, scrambling away clumsily as if his fragile human body could barely manage the movement. The alien made a notation on its device and continued past, clearly classifying him as a non-threat that could be collected later. Similar scenes played out in London, Tokyo, Sao Paulo, Mumbai, Cairo, Sydney, and every other invasion site. Humanity put on the performance of a lifetime, being exactly what the Vacrians expected: fragile, fearful, divided, dependent. The aliens spread deeper into the cities, extending their formations, dividing their forces to cover more ground. They established collection centers in open areas, set up processing stations, and began the systematic roundup of what they believed to be a helpless population. At 08:55 hours, Hawkins gave the 5-minute warning. Every soldier, every operative, every person who would transition from victim to fighter received the message. The greatest act of collective deception in human history was about to end. Thelzar stood in what had been Times Square, surveying the operations with satisfaction. Several hundred humans had been gathered into a containment field, showing all the expected signs of distress. His troops moved efficiently through surrounding buildings, reporting minimal complications. A few humans had attempted ineffective resistance, but they were easily subdued, their fragile bodies unable to withstand even light restraint. "Commander, we're ahead of schedule," Krell reported. "At this rate, we'll have the primary urban centers fully secured within..." The world changed at precisely 0900 hours. The humans in the containment field suddenly stopped their fearful cowering. The ones who had seemed injured or weak straightened up, discarding fake braces and props. Throughout the city, in every building, every alley, every position the Vacrians had passed while pursuing what they thought were terrified civilians, humans revealed themselves. Richardson threw off his fake arm brace and raised an M4 carbine that had been hidden beneath his jacket. Around him, 50 other soldiers who had been playing scared victims did the same. The aliens, who had walked right past them assuming they were too fragile and frightened to fight, suddenly found themselves surrounded by heavily armed humans who weren't fragile at all. "Light them up!" Richardson's sergeant shouted, and the morning air filled with gunfire. The Vakrians had expected capture operations against weak, frightened beings. They found themselves in a shooting war against an apex predator that had been playing dead. Their light restraining equipment was useless against bullets. Their formations, spread thin to cover maximum ground for their roundup operation, were exposed and vulnerable. Their tactics, designed for managing frightened civilians, fell apart instantly against coordinated military action. In Tokyo, alien soldiers who had confidently entered buildings found themselves trapped in kill zones as humans emerged from hiding with weapons and explosives. The structures the Vakrians had assumed humans would flee from became fortresses defending every floor. In London, alien vehicles designed for transporting prisoners discovered why humans historically developed anti-armor weapons. Rocket-propelled grenades fired from seemingly abandoned buildings turned their transport fleet into burning scrap. In Sao Paulo, aliens who thought humans needed constant water found themselves fighting in tropical heat against soldiers who had trained for jungle warfare. The humans operated at full efficiency, while the overconfident aliens, unprepared for real combat in challenging conditions, struggled. Across every invasion site, the pattern repeated. The Vakrians had deployed for a roundup and walked into meticulously prepared ambushes. Every assumption they had made about human fragility, fear, and disorganization became a fatal weakness in their own strategy. Thelzar watched his neat invasion collapse into chaos. Reports flooded in from every site. Humans weren't weak. They weren't fragile. They weren't afraid. They had been acting, and his forces had fallen for it completely. "Impossible!" he roared. "Our data, our scans, our observations." "We're all wrong, Commander," Krell said quietly, staring at a screen showing human soldiers efficiently dismantling a Vakrian position. "Or deliberately misled. Look at them. They're coordinated. They're strong. They're not even slowing down after hours without water. And their weapons." On the screen, a human soldier took a fall that should have shattered the fragile bones the Vakrians had expected. Instead, the human rolled, came up firing, and eliminated 2 alien soldiers before taking cover. No broken bones, no weakness, just efficient, deadly combat capability. Hawkins allowed herself a cold smile as reports came in. Phase 2 was proceeding exactly as planned. The Vakrians had committed their forces to extended positions designed for population management, and now they were learning the difference between rounding up frightened civilians and fighting the most persistence-hunting, pattern-recognizing, tool-using, endurance-running, socially coordinating species Earth had ever produced. "Deploy our armor," she ordered. "Time to show them what a real military force looks like." The Vakrians had brought transport ships and processing equipment. Humanity brought tanks. The aliens had nets and containment fields. Humans had artillery. The invaders planned for a 3-day operation to secure a frightened population. The defenders prepared for a war, and they were very, very good at war. Colonel Jackson coordinated from Central Command as combined forces operations unfolded globally. Air support is engaging their landed ships. Ground forces are collapsing their perimeter in New York. Naval assets have destroyed their ocean-based platforms. Ladies and gentlemen, we are systematically dismantling an invasion force that thought we couldn't organize a neighborhood watch. The psychological impact on the Vakrians was almost as devastating as the physical assault. They had convinced themselves they understood humans based on faulty data and cultural bias. The cognitive dissonance of discovering how thoroughly wrong they were broke their military cohesion faster than the actual fighting. In Moscow, a Vakrian unit attempted to surrender after realizing the humans they'd been casually hurting minutes earlier were now executing a tactical encirclement with professional precision. The aliens had assumed humans would fight as disorganized individuals. Instead, they faced a species that had refined combined arms tactics through thousands of years of warfare against themselves. By noon, the Vacrian invasion was effectively over. Some scattered groups still fought, but their leadership was in chaos, their logistics were destroyed, and their troops were either captured or retreating to landing craft that may or may not still be functional. Thelzar sat in his command chair, watching the disaster unfold. Every assumption had been wrong. Humans weren't fragile. Their bones could withstand impacts that would have been lethal to the Vacrians' preliminary assessment. They weren't dependent on constant hydration. They could fight effectively for days with minimal water. They didn't need artificial temperature regulation. They adapted to environmental conditions with disturbing effectiveness. They weren't emotionally unstable cowards. They were calculating predators who had used those assumptions against him. "Request retreat authorization from the Fleet Command," he said quietly. "Inform the Council that Earth is not suitable for invasion. Classification: Apex Hostile. Recommended action: Quarantine." Krell worked his console, then looked up with an expression of defeated realization. "Commander, the humans have jammed our long-range communications. We cannot reach the fleet." Of course they had. Because humans understood electronic warfare as well as physical combat. Because they were technologically sophisticated enough to intercept, translate, and exploit alien communications. Because every single thing the Vacrians had assumed about Earth had been catastrophically wrong. Hawkins received the communications jamming confirmation with grim satisfaction. "How many of their command staff are still in orbit?" "Estimates suggest Thelzar was overconfident enough to lead from the front," Torres reported. "Best intel says most of their leadership came down personally to oversee the easy conquest." "Then we need to have a conversation with them about the terms of their surrender," Hawkins said, "and about what message they'll be taking back to this Galactic Council of theirs." The fighting wound down over the next 6 hours as remaining Vacrian forces realized their situation was hopeless. Human military doctrine, refined through generations of warfare, proved overwhelmingly effective against aliens who had prepared for crowd control instead of combat. By evening, Commander Thelzar found himself standing in what had been his command center, now occupied by human soldiers. General Hawkins entered, flanked by guards, and regarded the alien commander with an expression that was neither cruel nor kind, simply professional. "Commander Thelzar," she said, "let's discuss your species' fundamental misunderstanding of mine." The alien looked at her with what might have been resignation. "Your deception was thorough." "It wasn't deception," Hawkins corrected. "It was you seeing what you expected to see. We simply didn't correct your assumptions. Humans can break bones, so you concluded we're fragile. You didn't account for the fact that we also heal them and keep fighting. We need water, so you assumed we're dependent. You didn't realize we've evolved to persistence hunt across distances that would kill most species through dehydration. We wear clothes in cold weather, so you thought we couldn't regulate temperature. You didn't understand that we've adapted to survive everywhere, from Arctic tundra to desert wastes." She pulled up a chair, sitting across from the defeated commander. "But the biggest mistake you made was assuming our entertainment media represented our actual capabilities. You watched our fiction and thought it was documentary. You saw our survival training and thought it showed our limits rather than our preparation for exceeding them. You observed our political debates and thought we were divided, when in reality, we're a species that loves arguing with ourselves right up until someone else threatens us. Then we unify faster than you can imagine." Thelzar absorbed this quietly. "What will you do with us?" "That depends on what you do with the message we're sending back with you," Hawkins replied. "You're going to take your surviving forces and leave Earth. You're going to return to your Galactic Council, and you're going to tell them that humanity is not interested in being part of their collection of conquered worlds." She leaned forward. "But here's the important part. You're also going to tell them that if they leave us alone, we'll leave them alone. We're not interested in conquest. We're not looking to expand into their territory. We just want to be left in peace to develop on our own terms. And if the council doesn't agree to those terms? The alien asked. Hawkins smiled, and it was not a comfortable expression. Then you're going to explain to them, in great detail, how thoroughly your invasion failed, how we turned your assumptions against you, how we exploited every single piece of bad intelligence you based your strategy on. And you're going to make them understand that if they come at us again, we won't be playing weak. We'll be ready. And we're a species that gets very, very creative when we're fighting for our home. She stood. You have 24 hours to gather your people and prepare for departure. We'll release your communications so you can coordinate with your ships in orbit. Any vessel that hasn't left Earth's orbit after that deadline will be considered hostile and engaged accordingly. Are we clear? Clear, Thelzar acknowledged. General Hawkins, for what it's worth, I apologize for underestimating your species. It was arrogant and foolish. Yes, Hawkins agreed. It was. Learn from it. The Vacrian withdrawal began immediately. Human forces maintained strict security, ensuring the aliens departed efficiently, but allowing them to collect their dead and wounded. It was important, Hawkins had argued, that the survivors return home with a complete picture of what happened. Fear would make them exaggerate human capabilities. Respect would make them accurate. Both would serve humanity's purpose. As alien ships lifted off from cities around the world, Dr. Chen stood with Hawkins overlooking the New York evacuation. Do you think they'll really leave us alone? He asked. I think they'll be very careful about checking their facts before they bother us again, Hawkins replied. And I think word will spread in their Galactic Council about what happens when you invade Earth based on bad intelligence. We got lucky, Chen observed. If they'd done better reconnaissance, if they'd understood us correctly from the start, then we would have fought them straight up and hoped for the best, Hawkins said. But they didn't. They saw what they expected to see, confirmed their biases with cherry-picked data, and attacked what they thought was an easy target. That's not our luck. That's their failure. She watched another alien transport climb toward orbit. Every species has blind spots. Theirs was assuming that because we seemed fragile and divided from their limited observation, we actually were. They forgot that the most dangerous predator is often the one that doesn't look dangerous until it's too late. Over the next few days, humanity began the process of recovering from the brief invasion. Casualties had been remarkably light, thanks to the strategic advantage of knowing exactly what the enemy expected and being able to prepare accordingly. Infrastructure damage was moderate, mostly from the initial alien landings and the final battles rather than prolonged warfare. International cooperation remained strong in the aftermath. The governments of Earth had shown they could unify against an external threat, and while everyone expected the usual political tensions to return eventually, there was a new understanding that humanity could work together when necessary. The intelligence community conducted extensive debriefings, analyzing everything learned about the Vacrians and their Galactic Council. Dr. Lisa Park and her team reverse-engineered captured alien technology, though much of it proved less advanced than expected. The Vacrians had superior space travel, but their military technology had stagnated precisely because they'd been conquering less developed worlds for generations, without significant resistance. They're bullies, Torres concluded in her report to the United Nations Security Council. They pick on species they perceive as weak, overwhelm them quickly, and move on. They haven't fought a real war in centuries. That made them sloppy. The analysis also revealed that the Vacrian intelligence failure wasn't just bad luck. Their entire culture was built on confirmation bias and rigid hierarchies. Junior officers who questioned data were punished. Alternative interpretations of observations were discouraged. When their initial scans of Earth suggested fragility and disorganization, every subsequent piece of intelligence was filtered through that assumption. It's a teachable moment, General Hawkins noted during one debriefing, about the danger of believing what you want to believe, instead of testing your assumptions. 3 weeks after the invasion, Earth received its first communication from the Galactic Council. The message was formal and cautious. The Council acknowledged that a regrettable misunderstanding had occurred. They extended official recognition of Earth's sovereignty and proposed establishing formal diplomatic relations. The human diplomatic team, hastily assembled from career diplomats and military strategists, crafted a careful response. Earth would accept diplomatic relations on the condition that humanity remained independent and was not expected to subordinate itself to Council authority. Earth would be willing to share certain technologies and cultural exchanges, but would maintain its own military and borders. Most importantly, the response made clear that any future aggression toward Earth, or any attempt to interfere in human affairs, would be met with full military response. The brief war had proven humanity could defend itself. The diplomatic message made sure everyone understood that humans would. Commander Thelzar, demoted but retained as an advisor due to his first-hand experience, presented Earth's response to the Council, along with his full report of the invasion's failure. The Council members listened with increasing discomfort as he detailed exactly how badly they had misread humanity. "They are not fragile," Thelzar concluded. "They are resilient beyond what our models predicted. They are not divided. They unite effectively against external threats. They are not dependent on constant resource access. They are adapted for endurance. They are not technologically inferior. They simply hadn't prioritized space travel yet. And most critically, they are exceptionally skilled at warfare. They've been fighting among themselves for their entire history, refining tactics we've forgotten existed." A council elder, speaking for the assembly, asked the question they all wanted answered. "What do you recommend regarding Earth?" "Leave them alone," Thelzar said without hesitation. "Establish trade relations if they're willing. Share technology carefully, but never, under any circumstances, threaten them or try to conquer them. They will surprise you. They will outmaneuver you, and they will win." He paused, remembering his conversations with General Hawkins. "And if you give them reason, they will come for you. They haven't developed interstellar travel yet, but after seeing their technology, their determination, and their creativity, I believe it's only a matter of time. When they do reach the stars, you want them to remember the Council as a partner, not an enemy." The recommendation was accepted. Earth would be offered a unique status, independent but recognized, potentially dangerous but currently cooperative. It was the best outcome humanity could have hoped for, born from an enemy's catastrophic intelligence failure and humanity's deadly exploitation of those mistakes. Back on Earth, life gradually returned to normal, though normal now included a space monitoring system watching for alien visitors and an international defense force ready to respond to extraterrestrial threats. Scientists worked on understanding alien technology, with an eye toward developing Earth's own interstellar capability. The planet had been introduced to a larger universe, and humanity was determined to meet it on equal terms. General Hawkins retired 6 months after the invasion, having overseen the successful defense and the establishment of Earth's new space defense initiative. On her last day, she gave an interview that would be quoted in history books for generations. "People asked me if I was scared when we learned aliens were coming," she said. "Honestly, yes, of course I was scared. But then I learned what they thought of us, and I realized something. The most dangerous opponent isn't the one with superior technology or greater numbers. It's the one who underestimates you." The Vakrians looked at humanity and saw weakness because they didn't understand what they were looking at. They saw bones that could break and assumed fragility, not healing. They saw conflict and assumed division, not passionate debate. They saw dependence and assumed helplessness, not adaptation. She smiled. "Humans are many things, but we're not what the Vakrians expected. We're survivors. We're problem solvers. We're creatures who look at impossible situations and figure out how to turn them to our advantage. That's not luck. That's who we are. and any alien species that forgets that is making the same mistake the Vacrians made. The interview concluded with a question about humanity's future in space. Hawkins's answer was simple. We're going out there, not to conquer, not to fight, but to explore and grow. But we're going out there ready because we've learned an important lesson. In a universe full of other species, some friendly and some not, the best defense is making sure nobody ever makes the mistake of thinking humans are easy prey ever again. 10 years after the invasion, the first human ship capable of faster-than-light travel launched from Earth orbit. It carried a crew of scientists, diplomats, and soldiers. The scientists were there to explore. The diplomats were there to make friends. The soldiers were there as a reminder of what happened to those who mistook human adaptability for weakness. The ship's name was Unity, representing Earth's newfound cooperation. Its motto, suggested by a retired general named Patricia Hawkins, was inscribed on a plaque in the main corridor. Underestimate us at your peril. As Unity jumped to faster-than-light speed and began humanity's journey into the stars, observers on Earth marked the moment as the true beginning of human space exploration. But historians noted something else. The real beginning had been the moment when an alien species made assumptions based on incomplete data, and humanity taught them a lesson about the deadly precision of exploiting someone else's mistakes. The Vacrians had looked at humanity and seen fragility, fear, and dysfunction. They had been wrong about all of it. And in being wrong, they had given Earth exactly what it needed: motivation to unite, a demonstration of what threats existed beyond Earth's atmosphere, and proof that humanity could defend itself when properly motivated. In classrooms across Earth, children learned about the invasion as part of history curriculum. Teachers emphasized the importance of not making assumptions, of testing your theories, and of understanding that appearances can be deceiving. But the deeper lesson, the one that shaped human policy for generations, was simpler. Never again would humanity be caught unprepared. Never again would anyone mistake human diversity for disunity, human caution for cowardice, or human adaptability for weakness. The Vacrians had given Earth a gift they never intended: the knowledge that humans could face the unknown and win, not through superior technology or overwhelming force, but through the uniquely human ability to turn an opponent's expectations into a weapon. As Unity and subsequent human ships explored the galaxy, they found the Galactic Council to be a complex organization of species with varying attitudes toward Earth. Some were curious and friendly, others were cautious and distant. But none, having heard the story of the Vacrian invasion, made the mistake of underestimating humanity again. Commander Thelzar, in his later years, became an unlikely advocate for Earth in Council proceedings. His warnings about human capabilities were initially dismissed by some species as excuses for his failure. But as more species encountered humanity in trade and diplomacy, they began to understand what he had tried to tell them. Humans were not superior to other species in most measurable ways. They were not stronger than the Corthians, not more intelligent than the Quellan, not more technologically advanced than dozens of council members. What made humans dangerous was their ability to assess, adapt, and exploit. They learned fast, they worked together when necessary, and they had an unnerving talent for finding weaknesses in systems that seemed solid. They are persistence predators, Thelzar explained to a council gathering 20 years after the invasion. In the ancient times on their world, humans hunted by simply following prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. They weren't fast enough to catch most animals in a sprint. They weren't strong enough to overpower them in direct confrontation. But they could keep going, hour after hour, day after day, until their targets simply gave up. That's what they did to us. They saw our assumptions, our biases, our certainty, and they waited. They let us commit. They let us expose ourselves. And then they used our own momentum against us. A young council member asked, "Should we fear them?" Thelzar considered the question carefully. No, but you should respect them. And you should never, ever think you understand them completely based on limited observation. That was my mistake. I saw what I expected to see instead of what was actually there. I mistook their willingness to show weakness for actual weakness. I assumed their conflicts meant division rather than passionate engagement with ideas. I thought I was invading a fractured, fragile civilization. I was actually attacking a unified, resilient species that was very, very good at letting me think I had the advantage until the moment they took it away. The council member nodded slowly. What would you say is humanity's greatest strength? They make the best of bad situations, Felzar replied. Every challenge they face, they turn into an opportunity to learn and grow. Their planet was harsh and unforgiving, so they became adaptable. They faced countless obstacles, so they became problem solvers. They fought among themselves for millennia, so they became experts at conflict. And when I invaded their world based on faulty intelligence, they turned my mistakes into their victory. That's what makes them formidable. Not that they're unbeatable, but that they're unconquerable. There's a difference. Back on Earth, that spirit of turning challenges into opportunities continued to drive human development. The alien technology recovered from the Vacrians was studied, adapted, and improved. Human engineers looked at Vacrian designs and asked not, how does this work, but how can we make it better? Dr. Park, now heading Earth's Aerospace Development Agency, reflected on this during an interview. The Vacrians had faster-than-light drives that worked fine for their purposes, but when we examined them, we found inefficiencies they'd never addressed because they were good enough. We optimized the power consumption by 30%, extended the range by 20%, and reduced the manufacturing costs significantly, not because we're smarter than them, but because we came at it fresh, without preconceptions about how it should work. This became the pattern for human advancement into space. Earth didn't just copy alien technology, they improved it, adapted it, and combined it with human innovations in ways other species hadn't considered. The Council watched with a mixture of admiration and concern as humanity went from pre-FTL to competitive spacefaring in less than 2 decades. Some species proposed limiting human access to certain technologies, worried about how quickly they were advancing. But Thelzar's faction argued against restriction, pointing out that trying to contain humanity had led to his failed invasion in the first place. Let them advance, he advised. Trade with them, learn from them, but don't try to control them. They're innovators by nature. Restricting them will only make them more determined to find alternatives. Better to work with them than against them. As the 50th anniversary of the invasion approached, Earth had become a recognized member of the Galactic Council with full diplomatic status. Human colonies had been established on 3 planets and 24 space stations. Earth ships traveled freely throughout Council space, trading, exploring, and occasionally resolving disputes with a pragmatism other species found both refreshing and unsettling. General Hawkins, now in her 90s but still sharp, was invited to give a speech at the anniversary commemoration. She stood before an audience of humans and aliens, including Commander Thelzar, who had traveled to Earth specifically for the event. 50 years ago, she began, the Vacrians came to Earth expecting an easy conquest. They had done their homework, studied our world, and concluded we were weak. They were wrong, but not in the way most people think. They weren't wrong because we're stronger or smarter or better than them. They were wrong because they confused different with inferior. She looked directly at Thelzar in the audience. Humans are different from Vacrians. We have different strengths, different weaknesses, different ways of solving problems. The commander and his forces looked at those differences and saw only what matched their expectations of weakness. They missed the parts that made us dangerous. But here's what I want everyone, human and alien, to understand. The lesson of that day isn't that humanity is superior. It's that assumptions are dangerous. The Vacrians assumed we'd react a certain way based on limited data. We exploited those assumptions with deadly precision, yes, but we could just as easily have been on the other side of that equation. We could have been the ones making wrong assumptions about an alien species and paying the price. She smiled slightly. So let this anniversary be a reminder. When you meet something different, don't assume you understand it. Test your theories, question your conclusions, respect the possibility that you might be wrong, because in a universe as diverse as ours, the deadliest mistake isn't being weak. It's thinking you know everything about your opponent when you barely scratch the surface. The speech was met with approval from both human and alien attendees. Afterward, Thelzar approached Hawkins, his translator device rendering his words into English. "General, I wanted to thank you for your words, and for not having me executed 50 years ago." Hawkins laughed. "You were doing your job based on the information you had. I can't fault that. I can fault the intelligence gathering that led to that information, but not you following it. Still, I cost many lives on both sides due to my errors." "Yes," Hawkins agreed, "and you've spent the last 50 years making sure other species learn from those errors. That's what matters. Not that we make mistakes, but what we do after we make them." As Earth's second century of membership in the galactic community approached, humanity had carved out a unique role. They were innovators, mediators, and when necessary, warriors. They brought fresh perspectives to old problems and unconventional solutions to new challenges. They weren't the strongest species militarily, or the most advanced technologically, or the wisest philosophically, but they were the species others had learned not to underestimate. And in a galaxy where assumptions about other species could lead to everything from trade disputes to military disasters, the humans who had once turned alien misconceptions into decisive victory had become the voice reminding everyone to look deeper, question assumptions, and respect differences. The story of the Vacrian invasion became a cautionary tale told throughout Council space, not as a story of human superiority, but as a demonstration of what happens when intelligence fails and bias clouds judgment. Military academies of a dozen species studied Earth's defense as an example of asymmetric warfare and strategic deception. Diplomatic corps used it as a case study in cultural misunderstanding. And on Earth, in the archives of human history, the invasion was remembered as the moment humanity proved something important about itself. Not that humans were invincible or superior, but that they were survivors, adapters, and when pushed, remarkably creative at turning disadvantages into advantages. The Vacrians had gotten their facts wrong about humanity. They had paid for those mistakes with a failed invasion and damaged pride. But both species had grown from the experience, and the galaxy was better for it. Earth had learned it wasn't alone in the universe. The Council had learned that new species could surprise them, and everyone had been reminded that in the vast complexity of the cosmos, assuming you understand something fully is often the first step toward a very painful lesson in humility.